All right, hello everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Marty Duffy, Liz Rhoades, and Lou Bryson. Plus, this week's two special guests, Ari and Andrew from Thornton Distilling Company. I'll let your hosts give a more formal introduction to them in just a moment. Real quick before we get started, I'm Will Hookinga from Davy.co. Just as always, want to point out a few different ways you can interact with your hosts and their guests throughout the show today. So, to your right, you'll see a chat box that makes it easy to just say hello. Let us know where you're joining us from. It's always nice to see that. If at any point during the show you have a question, there's another little button at the bottom of your screen that says Ask a Question. That's the best place to enter that in to make sure that we get to that during the show. And last but not least, feel free to invite your friends to join us. There's a share button at the top that makes it easy to do that. But with all that said, Marty, Liz, Lou, I'll turn things over to you now.
Hey, thanks, Will. You're the best. I'm writing a little book about you called Farewell to Arms. It's about a young soldier who falls in love with a proctologist during the invasion of Grenada back in the 80s. Or Grenada. I spelt it wrong in the book. So, hi, everyone. My name is Martin Duffy. I'm a former senior master of whiskey for Diageo. I'm a former national brand ambassador for Benedictine for 18 glorious, very influential months. And then,
years.
Yeah, very very sticky 18 months. And then for 8 years, I was co-producer of Chicago Independent Spirit Expo. And for the last nearly 7, we're coming up on 7 years, the sole brand representative for Glencairn Crystal in all of North America. Hey, Colin, like Johnny Appleseed, except throwing glass on the ground wherever.
A little less sustainable.
That's me, yeah. Anyways, that's me. Little lizard.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Ari, I noticed your shirt. Great shirt you have on, American
nice
Association. I didn't notice that before, so way to rep. I like it. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm Liz Rhoades, technical distiller and spirit consultant. Have just over a decade of experience across the alcoholic beverage sector. Worked across multiple products, including beer, rum, vodka, but my particular favorite and expertise is in whiskey. Of course, that's what we're here for every week. I spent most of my career at a small little outfit known as Diageo.
Mom and Pop.
Mom and Pop. May have heard of it, may not have. But now I'm currently founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting. And hey, you want to learn more? That's great. If you just scroll down. There's a little link to my website. So check it out. Lou?
Thank you, Liz. I'm Lou Bryson. I'm a whiskey writer. I was the managing editor of Whiskey Advocate magazine for a wonderful 20 years until I walked out that door and walked back to my own door and went freelance again. I am currently plugging my latest book, Whiskey Masterclass, a guide to flavor and aroma creation in whiskey, and I am also working as a senior drinks writer for the Daily Beast, currently churning out a piece on the latest in hard seltzer, which is going to amaze you. And today I am drinking the new Fry Ranch Bottled and Bond Rye.
Oh, nice.
Notice, full-size bottle, Marty. Full size.
Yeah.
Full size.
Remember, folks, when you're sending Lou samples, always make them full size. None of these little bottles with no labels.
Over to you, sir.
Hello. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us again for another Sip of Knowledge. Welcome. Hey, Brad. Brad from Panama again. Lisa from Colorado. A former Diageo alum, Yves Costino. He used to run Bushmills. A French guy running Bushmills. Imagine that. Of course, they did a lot, now that I think of it. Hi, everyone. Today, we go a little local, at least for me. We have two gents from a distillery with a very storied past. And I like this place a lot because the story is actually legit. when you consider some of the prohibition connections, things like that. But it really goes way back in Illinois distilling history. We have one of the co-owners, Mr. Andrew Howell. Hello. And the fine, well-educated, internationally educated distiller, Ari Klafter. Klafter? Am I pronouncing that right?
Klafter. I'll go by either.
I'm going to just call you Clapper.
I'll respond to that.
Yeah.
No.
Clap on. Clap off. Okay. Gents, thank you. This is from the Thornton Distillery in beautiful Thornton, Illinois, just south of Chicago near the Illinois-Indiana border. Gents, welcome.
Thank you.
And, every time we have folks on, we ask them to give us a little brief rundown of how you got from point A to where you are now, which could be point B or it could be point Z. It could be the end of the road for you, as far as you know. Andrew, why don't we start with you first? How'd you get into this biz? How'd you end up co-owning that distillery?
Sure. Thank you. I started the company in 2015, but I got into craft brewing and distilling just at home. And then back in 2015, decided to try to start a distillery with some friends and realized I feel like I'm if it was baking, really good at home baking, but not really equipped to scale up recipes and whatnot. So Ari, being the smartest guy I know, I'd studied in Scotland and then was working at Privateer Rum. So we reached out to Ari and asked him to come on board and kind of take the copper helm. And so I defer to him now on all things distilling and then focus more on the marketing side. But kind of started in the garage and then just got motivated to try to start something kind of official. And then here we are.
Well, how'd you find that particular distillery?
So I lived in Chicago for 15 years and didn't have a car, wasn't really familiar with the south suburbs. Started looking at properties in the city, and then my mom actually, she lives in Omaha, Nebraska. She sent me, she's like, "Hey, I found a building. You should go check it out. It's got a cool history." So my mother, of all people, turned me on to the space, and then
Mom points out the distillery to her son.
Can't be the only time that's ever happened. Can't be.
Jim Beam's mom, Agnes. That'd be a good place over there, Jimmy.
So, that's the origin story. And then came to check out the property, and the property owner at the time, still my business partner. So he had always wanted to bring back the history. Had been vacant for about 15 years, was in a state of disrepair. It's about 20,000 square feet. So it was a pretty daunting process to bring the building back. And I think that scared a lot of people away from it. But once we learned the history and stuff, I was smitten. That's when we decided to establish Thornton Distilling Company and did about 3 years of construction, just trying to strip it down to the brick and mortar, making sure all the original architectural integrity was still intact. And we were pulling out, 3 layers of drop ceilings and just all these different layers. So it took a really long time. We did a lot of it, just like me, Ari, and friends and whatnot. And then 2 years later, started laying down barrels, and then laid barrels down for a couple of years, then finally did a grand opening right before the pandemic. So.
Good timing. Great timing.
Yeah, beautiful.
Ari, what about yourself? How'd you get into the biz?
Well, I've been distilling for about 5 years now, and I think I got bitten by the brewing bug far before I was actually interested in distilling. And really early, right as I turned 21, got super into beer, and didn't take me long to realize that people do this as a hobby. And I started doing that and being very process oriented and really liking science. Really, really kind of went down that rabbit hole and started a brewing club at my college. Had to jump through a few bureaucratic hoops to do that. But I started the brewing club, and I kept that on for years and really just liked it as a hobby. And at some point, I really decided, I'm good at this, and I developed an interest in spirits and whiskey, particularly during that time. I really wanted to take this to the next level. And I really wanted to get as much of a solid scientific background as I possibly could, rather than kind of just jump into distilling and see what happens. So I decided to do my master's degree in brewing and distilling at Heriot-Watt University in Scotland, which is a program that's generally geared toward the Scotch whiskey industry. And my main focus and one of my main interests is single malt whiskey. So there's a really nice dovetail there. And then after I completed my master's there, my first job stateside was assistant distiller at Privateer Rum. And then shortly after that, I saw what these guys were trying to do. I came out and saw the building and realized just how much potential there was here. And they were also interested in creating the types of spirits that I like to make. And so I've been here putting down barrels for going on 3 years now. And haven't looked back.
Yeah. What? Just out of curiosity, and I feel like the beer to whiskey lineage from a career perspective, I think both Lou and I can relate to that, although Lou's still very much in beer. What was that,
soaking in it.
Soaking in it. What was that process like? What made you move from beer brewing to whiskey?
It was actually just more a matter of taste. I still am a huge beer geek, and I love beer, and that's what I was obviously doing at home. Even if I was doing the other thing, I'm not going to say otherwise. But it was really a matter of me starting to taste whiskeys, taste bourbons and scotches, and really seeing that there's something there. And the other thing that I love about spirits is just the variety of raw ingredients involved. So I'm a huge nerd with mezcal, and I love rum as well. And just being able to be a distiller is really cool because I'm able to make a variety of different spirit categories from different raw ingredients under one roof and under sort of my main title. So I was really taken in with that. And I don't know. I mean, also at the time, when I decided to make this career shift, brewing was very saturated. And at the time, sort of trying to stake your own claim and start a small operation. Brewing was getting very, very saturated. Distilling is now also the same. But at the time, there seemed to be a little bit more room for growth. That's definitely secondary to distilling being more of a passion for me. But that was also a consideration. So I just saw a little more opportunity there.
Wow. How about going into a little bit of the history of that distillery? It goes back to 1857? Am I correct on that?
Yeah, the building was built in 1857. We kind of trace the history back to 1833. Two pretty well-known Chicago founders, John Kinsey and Gurdon Hubbard, purchased the property from an indigenous American, Claude Laframois, in 1833. Then they essentially rented it out to Berry Brewing Company. There was a little log cabin brewery. Actually, one of the town docent at the Historical Society was telling me the husband, Brewer Berry, passed away about a year after building the cabin, and then his wife operated the brewery until the building was built here. So the property was sold by Gurdon Hubbard and John Kinsey to John Bielfeldt in 1853. He was a German immigrant, came from a long line of brewers. The property had an artesian spring on it that the brewery cabin utilized for its water. So when Bielfeldt was looking for properties, he came across it. All limestone filtered water and whatnot, so it was pretty ideal for brewing. Built the building as it stands today, tapped into the spring, forming what is now the artesian well that we have. It's subterranean here on the property. And then started brewing, and the Bielfeldt Brewing Company operated all the way up until Prohibition.
Now, Will, can you bring up the photo of the well? There it is. Oh, that is cryptic.
It's kind of like the French catacomb down there. It's really interesting.
This is still operating, and do you guys still use this water?
Yeah, it taps into the deepest aquifer in Illinois. It's up to 1,500 feet deep. We repiped it when we moved in with 150 feet of new copper. Put a pump on it. Ari utilizes that to mash, circulates the water throughout the equipment.
Yeah, so we use that in most steps of our process. We're able to use it in mashing because it has a nice, good hard water, limestone filtered, so it takes a lot of the iron out. So it's really good for fermentation and yeast health. But we're also actually able to use it to cool our stills. So use that as condenser water. And then on top of that, we use that, I set up an RO system. So I have that going through reverse osmosis. We're able to use that same water source to proof down all of our spirits.
Oh,
And you guys are right next to a little river too, aren't you? Or
More of a creek.
Yeah, it's Thorn Creek.
Oh, Thornton Creek.
Thorn Creek.
Oh,
So,
Thorn Creek, even
yes.
more rustic sounding.
Yeah.
Very nice. Wow.
what's
that's funny.
is there an effect from the mineral content of the water as well?
Yes, and that's
Not
why.
just that it doesn't have iron in it. I mean, is what I'm getting at. I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So it's hard. There's a lot of dissolved solids, a high mineral content, which is really good on the brewing and mashing side. But that's also one of the reasons that we use RO to take out the dissolved solids for proofing down, because obviously we don't want it to create any sort of haze or anything in the bottle or off flavors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I often wondered, using limestone filtered water. What doesn't that leave? What kind of residue does that leave in the stills, if any? None.
No.
Yeah, because it screwed up our pipes at home. We had limestone water where I grew up.
Yeah, right.
Also to say that that descaling is something that's all that's on my mind. That's something that we do. No, not so much in the stills, but what I was noticing, and this is actually a little bit of a tangent. So all of our facility is 100% kosher certified through OU and also Tartikoff. And so in order to do some of our products, and particularly our kosher for Passover products, I go around and I kosher the entire facility, which means basically use boiling water to ritually clean everything. And what I've noticed, that's the time where I really notice there's a little bit of residue, because if I'm spraying something with really hot water and then you let that sit, there is a little bit of just sort of like a little chalkiness that's left behind. But again, that's something that actually works very well for our fermentations.
And you guys have been distilling for how long? Because it took a number of years for you guys to rebuild the distillery or build it out, correct? So 3 or 4 years? Do I remember that?
Yeah. The build out was about 2 years, and then we started production. Had to get the equipment and infrastructure in place, and that's when Ari essentially came on board. And
so it's going on 3 years now.
So what's the oldest spirit you got? I mean, is it 3 years old? Do you have 3-year-old whiskey, or are you going to lay that down even longer?
Actually, the oldest spirits we got is a couple barrels of rum. I just came from privateer and had rum on the mind, so started laying down some barrels of that. We have some whiskey that is approaching 2 years as well, approaching 3 years, so about 2.5. So.
Now,
Oh,
Are you going for 4 or 5 for the single malt?
I think we'd like to get up to around 5 years. Like, that's really my plan. As I'm sure a lot of you know, a lot of distillers' MO and ours as well is lay down more than you're going to sell initially, so that you can increase that age statement and have your flagship product be a bit older. Work up to that.
Now, is some of that from your training in Scotland, that you'd like to have your single malt down for, say, over 3 years, or you just think 5 is?
It's a matter of having high standards, knowing what kind of spirits I like and liking to find the balance. It's about knowing what kind of maturation conditions we have here, which are very different than you'd find in other parts of the country, and also very different than you'd find in Scotland. And I do think that about 5 years would work well. For single malt, also I use a mix of some new cooperage, but also a lot of refill bourbon, refill rum, and refill rye. So that mix, I think that really will start to shine and come together at around 5 years.
Would you consider aging any barrels down in the well, down that catacomb?
I would, but the only way to get down there is through steps, and I don't know how you get
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would that be too much work? Oh, I didn't know you guys were going
It's not stopping us yet.
the easy route.
Health and safety, baby. Health and
You could
safety.
take a empty barrel down there and pump it.
Yeah, but think about that, Lou. Think of the story.
Try to get that place bonded.
Think of the stories you
Oh,
guys
yeah,
can tell
Bond,
about the
yeah,
one
that's
guy who got killed, he got ran over by a barrel as it rolled down the steps on top of him. I mean, that's right
You're
here.
just telling everyone how it is now.
Yeah. That's what Ari was smushed right here, right on the spot in the well. It's haunted now by the ghost of Ari, our distiller.
And you can bet I will.
So,
It's a good marketing narrative. I like that.
I'm just saying, story marketing. That's what I'm just thinking.
I actually, I mean, appreciate Ari's, just circling back to the water conversation since we're talking about the well. I appreciate the fact that you mention RO for bottling, because I think a lot of other distillers who talk about limestone filtered don't actually address that, which I think is a little bit misleading, because obviously, calcium, magnesium, salts can, as you mentioned, precipitate. And so I think you made an important distinguish between process water versus product water, which is, I mean, that's an important piece of conversation. But and it sounds like you guys made a lot of critical decisions when reviving the site. Can you walk through what that looked like in terms of process and product decisions when reviving the site, what you chose to kind of protect and what you tried to evolve and kind of modernize?
Sure. I mean, starting with the building, we essentially stripped out all the drywall, the drop ceilings, as I mentioned, and just tried to strip it down to its architectural sort of foundation. And then there wasn't original equipment or anything like that. The building had been vacant, as I mentioned, for about 15 years. And the last brewery that operated out of here closed its doors in the early 1950s. So we were able to find a lot of cool artifacts and whatnot. But there wasn't any original equipment. So for the initial restoration was primarily just being able to obtain occupancy in the building so people could come in safely, and then installing new infrastructure. So there was a ton of new copper that got laid. And then as far as the actual equipment build out,
I can talk about that. And one thing I will just piggyback on that is that's also one of the reasons that that we do focus so heavily on single malt, because this building has 160 some odd year history of traditional malt fermentation. So if we do a distillery that focuses on bourbon or something like that, we found that was a really nice way to pay homage to the original purpose of this building. In terms of the build out, we do traditional off-grain fermentations for the single malt, but we also have a mash tun that can handle grain in fermentations, as well as our rum, definitely. For actual fermenters, I opted for pretty tall, slender fermenters that are more common in winemaking or in cider making. I do this because I really like a longer, more controlled fermentation. I didn't want to have as much contact with the yeast going through. I wanted to basically do it at a lower temperature, and I do find that that long fermentation works very well and gives a very delicate product coming from that style of fermenter. We have a 500-gallon stripping still. That is it's technically a hybrid still, so we can use that for a couple of different products. And then we have a 150-gallon spirit still, which is also a 4-plate column hybrid detached, as well as a gin basket. So for the gin, I employ various different techniques, including using that gin basket. And then we have, behind us a very traditional American-style rick house, as you can see on the edge of the production floor. And then we are just starting to build out another barrel house in the back.
So you mean that's not just a green screen?
No.
No, it's a great background.
This is a green screen.
One
back here.
of you guys should go back there and whack one of those barrels just to prove it. That's,
Yeah.
No, it's kidding. I was kidding. Well, there you go. Okay.
So I was going to just circle back on the distillation side, and just checking out the website. Was I not mistaken that your smaller setup is direct fire, or?
No. No, it's not direct fire. That might be nice at some point, but I also know in part of our building's history, way before us, there had been 3 major fires here. Again, way before us. Yeah. I know. Obviously, a lot of places safely do direct fire, and I actually love the character that it gives. A lot of the Meyer reactions I think about the spirit is very, very cool. But me being, I think, very safety oriented, just want to use steam for the time being.
Hey guys, going back in the history of the place, and I know that we spoke about this right before the show that you don't really want to play up the fedora and gangster era, but I have a personal kind of affection for that kind of stuff, only because when I first went there and found out that it was owned by Polak Joe. That's his real name, folks. I'm not being a jerk off or anything. His name was Polak Joe Saltis. Not this time. Very selective about when I'm a jerk off. All right. So Polak Joe was a real contemporary of Al Capone, but now at this time he was the facility being used more of a brewery than a distillery, or was there any distilling taking place during that time?
So when Prohibition was enacted, Bielefeld sold the property to the head brewer, Carl Ebner. That year on the census, he was listed as a soda pop manufacturer, which proved to be an illegal front. Government agents raided the building, and as the Tribune will attest, poured hundreds of barrels into Thorn Creek. The raid was rumored to have been orchestrated by the Chicago syndicate to get rid of a competitor, and then the Chicago outfit came in and filled the void. So Capone, sort of spearheading the efforts. Joseph Saltis was originally in the back of the yards. He had a small territory up north from here. And then I think when Capone sort of rose to prominence, everyone sort of fell in line that was willing to fall in line. And then he sort of became like a henchman on the ground here, managing ops. And then the gangsters continued to operate from the building during Prohibition. There's some interesting articles in the Tribune about agents trying to apprehend one of the soda pop brewers that he went down shooting in front. He had a warrant out for his arrest for that was issued in Kansas. And there's colorful lore like that. But yeah, we don't want to be like a pizza place with the fedoras and the Tommy guns. It's an interesting chapter of the building's history for sure. And we do a really comprehensive tour that sort of starts with the indigenous Americans that were here and then takes you through, all the way to modern day production, and then sort of the water being the common thread that has it all together.
Well, you have a slight little museum off to the side. I mean, if not so much a museum, but a display of a number of artifacts throughout the history of the distillery, correct?
Yeah, we have some really cool stuff that was found on the property during renovations. We were digging out back to seal the north subterranean distillery wall that's actually in back of us, and we were sealing it, and then there was all this stuff that we saw down there, and there were stacks of these stained glass windows from one of the beer brands that we have on display. There was one that wasn't broken, nestled in between all of them, and then one of the neighbors, actually, Harry, he's in his late 80s right now. I was at his house hanging out with him one night, and he's like, I got something for you. And he went upstairs and brought down like a metal keg. It's probably 15 gallons. That was from Thornton Brewing Company in the 30s. So we've amassed a cool little collection.
He never took it back and got his deposit.
Yeah.
Well, if he took it back now, think of the interest.
Oh, yeah. Of course, back then, the deposit was probably 50 cents.
Right. Now it's like $10, $20.
I recently had a woman reach out that unearthed a cache of photos from her great-grandfather that was a brewer here. There have never been interior shots that I've been able to find of the building and the equipment, and she sent me about 35 photos, so I'm trying to figure out how to use them and do a little show. There's some really cool stuff.
Wow. See, I love that stuff. That stuff is so cool. You guys did much better than Geraldo Rivera did when he dug up the Sturmac Hotel. Was it Sturmac? What was that? The Lexington House.
Oh, yeah, the Capone Hotel.
Yeah, what a fool. Do you remember that, Liz? Do you know anything about that? No, you don't. I'm going to send you a little link about Geraldo.
I didn't watch that either. I was
Well, you couldn't watch it. It took hours, and it resulted in nothing.
The same thing happened to us. We opened the second floor of a shed on our new property, and there was nothing in there. We even did it live on Facebook. Got nothing. Now I know how Geraldo feels.
You should. Geraldo would have done it. Drop of a hat. I'll show up.
I'm there.
Is there somebody connected to it? Anyone?
So I wanted to ask about your barrels. You use a mix of used and new cooperage. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use a mix of used and new cooperage. Our new cooperage get from Independent Stave Company. It's all 18-month seasoned staves, and then I use actually a mix of a low char with toasted barrel heads. So you really get a nice mix of those two different barrel profiles within the same barrel. And for used barrels, we use actually a lot of the same barrels that we're using for other spirits, which is really cool because for me as a distiller, I can dump a bunch of rum or rye in the morning and then 30 minutes later fill it with some single malt new make while it's still wet and boozy. So we do a mix of both, and we've also brought in some bourbon barrels as well.
So those barrels are very active then. I mean, the rum is still wet.
Percolating.
Barrel, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's great because you don't have to swell them, you don't have to add any water, and you still have, like I said, all that product that's kind of still in the wood that's going to influence the character of that single malt.
And are you considering any sort of special finishing as well in those rum barrels, or just it's all a part of?
I think so. I mean, for me, finishing is cool, but maturation is even cooler. Like a full-term maturation in an interesting barrel is, for me, far more fascinating than a finishing.
I love you.
You know what I mean?
You have a fan. Look at him. He's like a little kid. Kid in a candy store.
Would I rule that out? No. I mean, we've talked about doing some like wine barrel finishes and stuff, but as much as I can, I would actually just love to use those in maturations, and that could either be released as its own sort of product, as our like rum barrel matured single malt, or it can be a blending component in the final blend a couple of years from now. But either way, it's kind of more interesting to see what happens when that spirit spends its entire lifespan in that particular barrel.
So then you're using new cooperage for rum aging.
Yeah, for rum aging, and for a little bit of our single malt as well. Just give it a little more body color and
but now, do you ever
gradation compounds, all that good stuff.
do you ever play around with that, Ari? Do you ever say you take one of your single malt barrels and put your rum in it?
Haven't done that yet, but we actually have a good reason for that. All of our rum is kosher or passive certified, which means that it can't come in contact with grain at any point in life. So for that, we do use all new cooperage. And for the rum, we've done like some of the similar profiles that I talked about for the single malt, but we've also used a lot of toasted barrels of different toasting profiles and some even lower chars, like char 1.
And this was your first year. You mentioned that you launched the Kosher for Passover rum this year. Was that the first year that you did that?
It is actually. It is. So we had a fairly limited launch, and we did both a silver, so an unaged rum, as well as a barrel-aged rum. And we did a limited launch in Chicagoland, as well as New York and New Jersey. And so now we're that actually proved to be very, very successful. We also did a bottling with single cask nation that sort of dovetail with that. So they selected 2 barrels of our Kosher for Passover rum and bottled them for the single cask nation wine, which also proved to be really popular. So right now we're looking at Passover 2022 and trying to lay down more rum and plan ahead for that.
Awesome.
And I mean, obviously, this past year has been crap. There's been a horrible, big old up old keister for most distilleries. Well, it's true, and
It is true.
but now you guys have done pretty well. I mean, I think that this is just from me viewing from the outside.
That's 2020 for you.
Yeah.
Spirit whiskey.
But I mean, you guys did the hand sanitizer, but you also did pretty good bottle sales of people walking in. However, you did have to sacrifice things like you had a number of events that you used. Your place is pretty big. I mean, as far as event space. And so once these lockdowns and everything and things kind of open up a bit more, you should do really well. But how else did you guys survive this past year?
So we, it's a bigger property. So we have about 20,000 square feet and some big halls where we'll host markets and concerts and stuff like that. So obviously that, came to a screeching halt. Ari and I, when the pandemic was first announced, like a lot of other distilleries, had started chatting about sanitizer. And so we did a hard pivot, started making sanitizer. We had about 5,000 gallons. We decided just to give it away. So it's kind of cool. We were able to support the Army National Guard COVID test sites. We gave them sanitizer. It's interesting they couldn't procure it at the time, like during the peak, which was weird. And then all these different fire departments, nonprofits, and then locals in the community could come in and get some for free. So that kept us busy. Instead of sitting at home watching CNN, like just hair falling out in clumps, we were able to just, keep our hands busy. And so that was actually nice just to have something to focus on. And then it was interesting watching Ari try to do his production schedule because it's like, okay, I'm making sanitizer this week again. And then I don't know if you want to talk to that at all, but yeah, I mean, obviously we had to find a way to make all this hand sanitizer very quickly. So that was something I never thought I would be doing as a distiller, but it was a kind of a nice way that it was a fun challenge to have, and it's good to be able to help out the community. Maybe not fun. But
No. Let's can we edit that out?
that was not fun.
Not fun.
It's
Gratifying.
Yeah, there you go.
Gratifying is not always fun.
Yeah, gratifying. And unfortunately, we did launch actually distribution in April. So we're planning on last April launch, right as the pandemic hit. So unfortunately, distribution obviously very, very slow. And our bar and event spaces closed down. We did have a bottle shop here, and thankfully our community is amazing, and they'll come out and we're happy to support us. But otherwise, scale things down a little bit, and I just focused on trying to lay down inventory. I guess that's the one thing about when that sort of business comes to a halt, or you have to take on the chin like everybody else. You can at least lay down barrels of whiskey at a slower pace, to be sure, but that's what we're able to do.
It's nice though. It's coming back online with bars and restaurants starting to reopen. Our distributors doing a fantastic job, and all the reps are like hanging in there. And we're seeing like a big uptick right now. I think like a lot of people are, so that's really refreshing. A breath of fresh air. So yeah, things are going well. We're distributed now in like Indiana as well, and then as Ari mentioned, New York, New Jersey. Yeah. So it's getting back on track, and we haven't really rescheduled any of the larger events. Like we do a big metal festival every year, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre Market. We have oddities and curiosities vendors come out and metal bands play it. So we had to cancel that. We were planning a big drag show with a local drag artist. So we do a variety of crazy events here that will get rescheduled eventually, probably next year. We have a tattoo fest we're looking at rescheduling for October of this year. That's
Did you see Liz get all giddy?
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, are people showing it off, or is it getting done, or is it all of that?
Yeah.
So with the tattoo fest, it's not going to be like live ink like a lot of them are. I'm working with one of our regulars is a pretty well-known tattoo artist in Chicago.
Cool.
So he's putting it together and then going to have vendors that are kind of marketing their goods to tattoo artists. And then they're going to have the art on display for purchase. So a lot of them are artists that have like canvas and other mediums. And so we figured that'd be like kind of an original spin on it. And then target it more towards the actual artist.
A lot of people don't know Lou's beard is a tattoo. That's just
not actually hair.
Macro facial hair. So he
the 3D effect is amazing.
Yeah.
Some people do eyebrows. I mean, some people
There
do.
you are.
It's just a thing.
Liz has a life-size tattoo of herself.
On herself.
Yeah.
I actually went to a cigar box guitar festival where they were doing the same kind of thing. They were selling a bunch of like kits for making cigar box guitars. Was the major. Those were the most of the vendors there were either selling food or how to make a cigar box guitar. It was actually a great day. The music was awesome. It's really good.
It was really nice with nice, nicely wrapped cigar too.
Yeah.
So we try to hit all we try to be eclectic. So I'm planning a quilting festival as well.
Oh my God! You really are going for
Yeah,
it.
like a fiber fest. So
my first ever book signing for tasting whiskey was at a wool festival.
yeah.
You guys could have a Lou Bryson book signing festival.
It was a big damn deal. The New York State Wool and Knitting Festival. There were 35,000 people. It was awesome.
And that was the people lining up to get Lou's book.
Well, no, actually, there were about 30,000 women and 5,000 husbands, and they were all coming. I sold so many books.
Well, it's amazing.
I never would have. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do that. Why not?
Sure.
Wow. I never stopped signing books. It was amazing.
You guys are opening up a space for weddings. Distillery. Lou can perform ceremonies and book signings at the same time.
Awesome.
Boom.
Done. So yeah, we have a couple large halls that we can do about 300-person weddings here. It's an interesting space. So we're starting to promote that. That also opened during the pandemic. So the first events were our social distancing weddings where I was limited to 50 people per like CDC and state guidelines. So we were able to host some really unique events when it first opened.
Bride and groom kiss? Or did they have to social distance?
They blew a kiss. They would do a collective hand sanitizer place that we
Through a mask, though.
See you in a year. I'll meet you at our dream house in a year.
social
Do
distancing.
you have a kitchen on site?
We're building
Catering
one out
or-
now.
Okay.
We had one before. We have a little more construction before the building's 100% restored. So the next phase will be completed in June, and we're partnering. We haven't announced it yet with a local restaurant that's going to open a restaurant here in collaboration with us. So
Nice.
in June.
So I wanted to pivot back to whiskey, if that's okay.
Anytime you're ready.
So I wanted to ask you about any special new releases or interesting projects you had coming up on the horizon. I think there's we have some pictures to share on that, so I wanted to circle back on that.
The We actually have a project that we just announced, and really, proud of this one. This is our Illinois Peat. We laid down the barrels of the first ever Illinois peated whiskey using peat from Illinois. Andy and I were able to find a peat bog in western Illinois. We went out there and harvested, cut bricks of peat by hand. That's actually what you see now is the maltster in the smokehouse that we brought the peat to. So we dried the peat out here at the distillery for about 5 months, brought it to that small family-owned Sugar Creek Malting Company, a small family-owned craft maltster where they took our peat and used it to smoke malt. We opted for a Pilsner malt for this product, and then we brought it back into the distillery, mashed it, distilled it the same way we do with all of our single malts, and lay down barrels of that.
Look at that.
This is
like
the picture from where
That's a big hunk.
Ari, your arms look huge. You look like Captain America arms.
Well, I'm holding a big piece of peat. I mean,
Yeah.
With his talons, so he just
they offered me a shovel. I said no.
That malting facility, I mean, is everything a floor malting? Is it all done by hand? Because that's small.
And that's you can't see it here. That is again the smokehouse, and then me looking at a couple different varieties. But it is 100% floor turned malt. So they have long, shallow bins germinating, and it is turned by hand, which to me is as a distilling nerd and someone who's visited a handful of maltsters on a much larger and much more industrial scale, is fascinating.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I mean, when you see somebody doing it the old-fashioned way.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's something to it. I mean, it just seems like wow, you're going back in time, and it's real handcrafted. Not that the big guys are also fascinating too.
Yeah, to that point, like real shout out to Leopold Brothers with what they've done with their new melting facility. It's fascinating. It's gorgeous.
All cheers. Yeah, Todd, well done.
Liz, once again, drinking right off the still. That's what she does.
I like it raw. So back to this project. Did you do 100% of your mash bill was the smoked malt?
Exactly. So we found that the finished product wasn't super intense, although we definitely wanted to lean into the peakiness because that is the point of the project. But yes, we used 100% of that malt as the mash bill, and then we do a double batch distillation, double pot distillation for all of our single malts, and then we laid that down in a mixture of a couple of new low char casks and some ex-bourbon as well.
And now, do you do any unpeated malt?
Yeah, so that's actually the majority of what we do. So this is a really cool project, and it's fresh on the mind. We just announced it, so I figured it's worth talking about. But the majority of what we do is unpeated. Like I said, double pot distilled, long fermentations, off-grain fermentations, and put down in a mixture of used cooperage of different varieties and some new cooperage as well. I'm currently actually playing with a few different recipes to bring in some specialty malts into our mash bill. So all of our single malt to date has used brewer's malts. It's kind of like a little bit of a toasty character that comes from slightly less modified malt than I would find for distilling. But I'm now testing out a few recipes to bring in some roasted, some highly kiln malts as well.
Do you know what the ppm is?
We don't. It is, like I said, you saw pictures of it. We don't have no way to check.
Big nug, looking at ppm.
But I guess a better question is, can you talk about the profile a little bit?
Absolutely. For me, peat is fascinating because it's one of the purest expressions of terroir in whiskey, if you ask me. I remember, when I was studying in Scotland, not only visiting different distilleries and tasting different products that have peat from different regions, but actually seeing peat samples from different that are harvested from different places on a gas chromatograph. So like the GCMS and how they map up very differently. Like different samples from different parts of the region, different regions will map up in very different areas, and you can just get a real appreciation for how different peat can be depending on geography and then the conditions of the particular bogs. But I found that with ours, in comparison to, I think, the most popular peaty whiskeys, which you would associate with kind of very strong iodine flavors, a little more seaweed, kind of more classic like Isla flavors. This is definitely a lot more floral and a little bit vegetal.
Yeah.
So it strikes me as very
right, freshwater versus
exactly.
Yeah. So the ecosystem is a little bit different. Yeah.
So far less briny. And I also found that and this might also just be a product to the smoking regimen, is a lot less smoky and heavily phenolic than I find in some other peats.
That'd be really interesting to try an Illinois peated single.
Yeah.
I'm in. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got it.
When are you planning on releasing that?
We don't have a release date. I mean,
We have it, but we don't. So it's a few years at least.
yeah, a couple years down the line.
Okay, Lou and I are kind of old, so
Yeah,
I don't know if
step up
we're
here.
around. But Liz,
Ask
please let us know in a seance, would you? What it tastes
I mean,
like.
I'm already like looking at advertisements for movies that are coming out a few years down the line, thinking,
I wish I could see that. That's why I just watch old movies.
yeah, no disappointment.
Oh, that's great. Oh, W.C. Fields.
Ari sings to the barrels, and hopefully that'll fast track the.
Nice.
Giving them
nice.
reverberation,
Yeah.
especially if it's opera.
Oh, you mentioned something about the explosive aging technique you guys use. That's,
So we go to the quarry a little bit.
So the Thornton, Illinois is home to the largest limestone quarry in the Western Hemisphere, and so we get quarry blasts regularly that reverberate throughout the building. So those get people that those quarry blasts are agitating our barrels. And
Dude, that is a great name for a whiskey. That's why one of your releases should be called the Quarry Blast.
yeah,
Come on.
Or a metal band.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it was there. They actually. Oh, you know what? They might have been from Spinal Tap. The Quarrymen.
oh, the Quarrymen. That was
Beatles,
yeah, that was
Was that Spinal
John
Tap, or
Lennon's
was
band,
that
wasn't it?
or is that
I
a?
believe the Beatles' first name before the Beatles, it was the Quarrymen or
Oh,
something.
there you go.
Really?
Boom. See.
Yeah.
Oh,
The town docent at the Historical Society is a huge Beatles fan, and she taught me that right away. So.
Christina says, "Count me in for the last 4 bottles." The last 4
The
bottles.
last four?
Maybe at least 4 bottles.
Maybe at least 4 bottles.
Yeah. So people are excited to
Hey. Boom.
Good.
All right.
also
Get back to the sip of knowledge, guys. Then on those sales.
I see Martin says hello. So Martin, thanks for joining.
Is that how you pronounce it, Martin? Oh, it's because he is French.
Yes.
Wow.
Christina's from all the way from Germany. So you got to send those bottles to Germany.
Pack them up.
Pack them up, move them out, rawhide.
So all right, the last question I had was around, I think on the website you mentioned you're using multiple yeast strains. Is that just for segregating rum versus single malt?
Yeah, yes, and also between between also our spirits, I've laid down certain barrels, certain batches with some yeast strains versus others. So just channeling into rum because we're talking about that. Obviously, for me, I want to use a different yeast strain than I do a single malt, just because I'm going for very, very different things in the end product. But even within that, I will sometimes use more estery, heavier rum yeast strains versus a more plain one, depending on the type of cooperage that I think it's going to be going into, and also just to be able to create a little complexity for the blend down the line. So that I have different blending tools in terms of different barrels that have a little bit different profiles that we can then again create something that is hopefully greater than the sum of its parts.
Wow, that's so. I mean, you put a lot of thought into that. It's funny when I think of distilling and making whiskey. I kind of really it's very simplified up in here. You know, you distill some grain, you put it into a barrel, you put it in the barrel, you close the barrel, you put it away for a while.
There's a lot of variables, Marty.
I know there is. So I'm just always surprised when I rehear them.
But I remember back in the sorry, go ahead.
I've had fantastic stuff from people that don't really know the science behind it. They're just doing it, and it's like formulaic, and they know what to do, when to do it. And I've had some really great stuff. So I feel like that's more like my skill set, and then someone like Ari who understands the science of why something tastes the way it does or off. That's the big difference.
No, I find that stuff amazing. Every time we talk to different distillers, they're when they're doing something even slightly different, the fact that they came up with it, they thought of it. We saw this, and we thought, why don't we just change it a bit and do it this way? I mean, sometimes
when Paul cut the whiskey with cold coffee, remember that cold thing? I was like, yeah.
Brilliant.
Well, guys, too. So you're part of the Illinois Craft Distillers Association, I assume?
Yeah, I'm the secretary. I've been on that since
so you have to sit on the president's lap and take dictation.
And bring her coffee as well.
I've seen Mad Men. I know how.
Oh my God.
So now, do you guys ever go and visit your Illinois counterparts and exchange notes or pick up ideas and go, oh, hey,
absolutely, and that's part of the fun and one of the reasons I actually love this industry is just how much camaraderie there is. Even within these people that are in the same market and obviously fighting for shelf space and all that. Everyone is so supportive and just really good folk. And I was at 28 Mile Distilling a couple weeks ago, just visiting and then checking out what they were doing. And I love seeing what other distilleries were doing and seeing how they approach different problems. I mean, in my experience, a lot of breweries are sort of set up in a very similar way, but distilleries, like in terms of actual production facilities, very, very different. People have very, very different approaches to different parts of workflow, and it's really seeing how other people have tried to come up with that. And it's kind of, anything kind of goes in a distillery, and it's fascinating. But, there's a while back, we actually, just because of the pandemic, it had some supply chain implications, and because so many bars were doing bottled cocktails, getting glass was really hard. And so we found ourselves where I was really short of glass. And I was actually able to reach out to a local distillery that uses a similar glass that we do, Brown Brothers. Those guys are awesome. And they're just like, yeah, I can give you a couple pellets. Like, yeah, no problem. And so that's the type of thing where I really see distillers supporting other distillers. And it really makes me happy for the industry that we're in. And, I know somebody who's now in the process of opening up his own distillery. And I talk to him all the time and try to help him sort out, figuring out his processes and stuff like that. Because I know he's a good guy. I want him, I want the best for him. And I want him to also think that, hey, Ari's, the type of distiller that I really appreciate. And we should also go check out Thornton Distilling Company. Because those guys, are really helpful and they're great and love what they're doing.
We received a ton of help initially, Bill from Journeyman, amazing dude. Essentially, you have all these pointed questions when you're starting a distillery, or at least you should. And certain people will be like, oh, I'm happy to help. We have a consulting company. It'll cost you tens of thousands of dollars just to get some simple answers. Other people like Bill are like, come on by. And then he earmarks an entire day to answer all of our redundant questions and just totally the nicest person in the world. And so that's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, people now approach us with similar questions, and it's like, okay, time to pay it forward and save them some consulting dollars. And
Bill wanted to start a distilling school. at Journeyman, but he said, "Yeah, Marty, yes, how would I do it? What do you think?" And I go, "Well, why don't you choose a date?" And he looked at his calendar, and he was booked for like the next 2 years. So, well, I think the first thing you need is time before you're going to do it. But I mean, he is very giving. Most of those guys. I mean, I think that's one of the beautiful things, even among the big guys, though. When you talk to distillers, they're always very giving with their information and their time. And I always find it interesting that distilling attracts some of the nicest and yet colorful people that you run into. I mean, there's so many different weird backgrounds. And Ari kind of, he's a good man.
But yeah, I think you're right. The camaraderie that happens within our industry is pretty special. So that's something I appreciate about it as well.
Liz will come by and do consulting for free. She doesn't even charge.
Your camaraderie for you.
Yeah, she doesn't even charge.
Well, for the consulting portion, there's a lot of stupid questions you have when you start a distillery, and you don't necessarily want to pay someone to answer them. It's nice if someone's just like, bad idea, But then there's obviously a time and a place for a professional consultant to come in and, so we
good cover, good recovery.
So what's the plans now going forward if and when everything does open up? I know you have that, like I said, you have the event space. Well, you have actually 2 event spaces. One for your general events, another one for private events, which I think is smart for anyone who opens up a bar or now a distillery to have that other means of revenue, which for Bill Welter, I mean, it's been a huge, before the pandemic, it was a huge cash cow, and unfortunately afterwards it's the property that sits empty. But let's talk about normal times. It's huge. What's going to be your first move going forward?
So Journeyman's not too far, actually. I think they just hosted their first artisan market again with all the social distancing guidelines in place. So slightly modified, right? But we're somewhat similar where we have an event space and all that stuff's coming back online. We've seen a huge influx in inquiries for weddings for late 2021, 2022. So all the brick and mortar sort of operations, like our tours and everything, are going to come back online, which is fantastic, to reopen. And then we're seeing bars and restaurants, reemerge and finally start to place orders again. I know a lot of them were sitting on product they had ordered for St. Patrick's Day, 2019, and trying to burn through their inventory and depletion. And then we're starting to see sizable orders come through, so that's
good.
Breath of fresh air. And
starting to see their gin get depleted pretty quickly. As some of these on-prem places are starting to open up again, and building up the top end.
I'm sorry. Who's your Illinois distributor, guys?
Momentum.
Oh, very good. Fine folks at Momentum. And do you have feet on the ground? Do you have your own brand ambassador, or sales manager, somebody who's out there?
Yeah, sure, that's me. Sorry, I'm vaccinated, but
you had all your shots.
I also smoke a Juul, so that's the bane of my existence. So I do the sales locally here, and we're slowly growing. So we have a couple bartenders that are starting to do sales and whatnot as well. Do you want to talk about it while I recover?
Yeah. I think we also mentioned that we have some limited distribution in New York and New Jersey, so we do have a part of that outside of the sales there. But for time being, it is mostly Andy, and I sometimes play a supportive role in going out to key accounts. But it is very much, very very small operation, particularly as we recover and look to reopen and grow following the pandemic.
We just, pardon me, by the way. So we just recently kind of expanded into New York, as we mentioned. So we feel like we're done expanding into new markets, and now we're just going to focus on, Chicago and then ramping up production.
And I think on your website you have a map, right, of what particular stores and what markets are distributed in, which you can find. Actually, there's a green rectangle down below. You can click that link to their website, so you can kind of figure out where you can go check out and purchase their spirits.
Thank you.
Yeah. Check out their website, folks. And actually, anytime you're in Chicago, it's not that far from downtown. I would say it was about a 20-minute ride.
Yeah.
Straight down 90. And you're right near the Illinois. You're just west of the Indiana border.
Yeah, we're like 10 minutes from Three Floyds Brewery. So.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Who have also just entered
a little Illinois indie trail.
Yes. Abby, she's spearheading the Three Floyds Distilling project. She'd be an awesome guest for you guys. She's doing some really cool stuff over there. And then the website's thorntondistilling.com. So.
Well, I recommend it to anybody who's in Chicago to go down there. I mean, it's fun. And even, especially in the summer, because I like the front, that little, I don't know, it's like a little French-Spanish garden kind of little patio you have.
We call it a patio, but I do think French-Spanish garden might be good name.
When we were doing, I don't know if you know this, when we were doing construction, there was a rooftop AC unit that the roof had caved in. So we were like, this is a disaster. And then I was like, how about a patio? So
see, making lemonade from lemons there. That's good. Exactly. Well, I like it. I think it's really a great way to enter the distillery. And then the inside looks like you've entered an old saloon from, the old West.
Yeah, we sort of has like a old hunting lodge sort of problem. We hear a bunch of different feedback, but the bar itself's in the old malting tower. Took out the floor, so it's like this little unassuming bar you walk into, and then there's 3 stories of brick.
Cool.
Came out pretty cool. Like you can see like remnants from the old fires in the building. There's burnt rafters and stuff up above from some of the fires in like the early 1900s.
Have those rafters been checked?
We've had architectural engineers come in and
you just checking though. You never know. Then you have another patio all of a sudden.
Yes, we're in Cook County, and so the inspectors are very diligent. So.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
That's cool. Well, Liz, if you ever come back to Chicago,
I
never
still
know.
have friends who live there.
I don't know about that. I've talked to a lot of people. You burned a lot of bridges over here. That's all I'm going to say. But if you do come back, and Lou too, we should make a little journey down there, because it's not, like I said, it's not far at all, and yet it feels like you're definitely out of the city, but at the same time, it doesn't take long to get out of the city, which is weird.
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't take that much.
Yeah, because outside of, if you go west to Chicago, it feels like you really have to keep on driving until you're really out of the city. So many of the western suburbs are very crowded, but down where you guys are, it's kind of nice. It's kind of very blue collar and.
Yeah, definitely working class, and then it's kind of an underserved community. Everyone's like, "Why are you opening up down there?" And the history of the building aside, it's there's not a lot of breweries or distilleries down here. There's some fantastic smaller breweries that are our neighbors that we're really good friends with. They buy our barrels, and we work closely with them and stuff. But sort of what suburbs get neglected. No one never really talks about the south suburbs in Illinois, and there's really rich history down here, and then millions of people.
Do you have a mayor?
Yeah, the mayor of Thornton, Bob Kolash. He's an awesome guy. That village has been so supportive. Like, we wouldn't get that same sort of support in, a big city like Chicago. Down here, it's a little post-industrial town, and the building, our distillery building, is so important to the town history. The fact that we were investing and trying to bring it back, we get a lot of support from the community that we wouldn't get elsewhere, and it's really fantastic.
Well, tell me if you want a new mayor, because I'm looking.
He just announced he's not running for re-election. So.
He's not?
Yeah.
Marty, there you go, buddy.
That's exactly what I'm looking to be the next Richard J. Daley, not M. Richard J. Daley, my own little metropolis.
I can run for campaign here locally if you'll let me.
I'll be the boss for the next 25 years.
I hate to break up the party, but we're now running down on time. Andrew, Ari, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you all very much.
Again, there's a link below. Check it out. Check out their website. Check out their spirits.
Yeah, cool website.
Thank you.
A lot more of those pictures. Yeah.
Plus, you guys are open for folks to walk in and buy.
Yeah, our cocktail bar just reopened, so ThorntonDistilling.com, and then our bar and restaurant operations open Wednesday through Sunday.
There you go. Well, sweet, guys. Thank you very much. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. Next week, we have the adorable Andrew Weir. He is a longtime industry professional and the brand manager of Aberlour. Single malt Scotch. He's a Scottish fella from the UK. And kind of reminds me of Chandler from Friends. He just
Never saw it.
You didn't see it? Oh, never saw Friends?
I never saw Friends.
Oh my God! Wow,
it's an amazing.
Were you kept in like in a little crypt or some kind of container for the first 20 years of your life? It's in reruns everywhere.
Ari has the Criterion collection. He'll send it over.
Yeah. I mean, if I can start with that.
Thank you, Ari.
Friends, wow. The Criterion, wow. You get all the background on Chandler and Joey.
All in time for the session next week, since apparently our guest next week is.
Yeah. It'll be
Now,
important.
actually, that might just be in my mind. But he's a great guy. He's a great guy and has a lot of great background in the Scotch industry. So we welcome him and everyone else to join us. In the meantime, everyone, drink deep from the well of knowledge or the well of Thornton.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Guys.
Cheers, kids.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.